I've always been one that would look down on my grass.
The soil health deals, like it couldn't make much improvement.
Things didn't look healthy the way we were doing things.
We were doing everything quote unquote right.
And I knew we had to do something different.
Our rotation, it requires something different.
So we changed our method of grazing.
And then it just boomed with soil life and health and plant structure.
And that allowed us to change our whole operation. The mindset change was the biggest change.
How has it changed my management thinking? It's changed everything about it. It changes your dynamic.
Changed our cost of production.
It's really changed our feed requirements.
Changed the style of our cattle.
Calving, that's a big change.
And in doing that, we changed our whole outlook on ranching.
I'm Bart Carmichael, owner of Wedge Tent Ranch, and we're 25 miles north of Faith, South Dakota. When we come here, there was just 3 pastures, basically, 4 seasonal deals. One was hay ground, and you just kind of turned them out in a big pasture for the summer, and we chunked stuff off into sections. Went from sections down to half sections. I figured me and a kid or me and a dog could gather half sections, so that's really all we needed to do. And then in 2012, it was so dry. And I tell people this isn't what to do, but we just we quartered them quarter sections up into 40-acre chunks, put cows on them for 3 days at a whack. And that was all temporary fence, and it really worked. We had a response. If we got a tenth of rain, it responded to it. So then we kind of jumped in, and then we started fencing fenced all them quarters into thirds with permanent high tensile electric wire. We subdivide that as we feel the need, but we can do daily moves inside them strips.
My name's Pat Guptill. We're on the Guptill Ranch by Quinn, South Dakota in West River. I could never understand why I was haying all summer, hauling the hay in, and then hauling it right back out to where I fed it. And we were still buying a protein source for the cows. And finally I just got the point, well, why don't we just graze it?
Move them cows on a short duration, high intensity, high density. That was like a real light bulb moment for me. It just changed everything. And then we went into it whole hog.
Probably the biggest thing about year-round grazing is being able to manage your grass so you'll have grass for year-round grazing. That's the number one thing. We no longer look at our cows as our primary management. We're managing grass. And the cows are just a tool we use to manage grass now. And one of the huge things that you gotta be careful of when your grass is short is if you graze that pasture too far down, bare the ground, and not let anything rest or recover or any of that, it'll take 3 to 5 years for it to come back to recover. But if you leave that ground covered with the blanket on top, the armor on top of it, 3 to 5 months after you get substantial rain on it, it will be ready to graze.
Year-round grazing has really helped our diversity of our pastures. I mean, it's increased the species immensely. When we first come here, and like I said, it was pretty much grama grass and western. That was just kind of the mix, And then there was some green needle and stuff, but now, we had a deal here a year ago, and I don't know, probably 100-yard stretch, we counted over 100 different species of grasses, shrubs. And it's because of that every plant requires something different. So that's where that year-round grazing has done it, because we're hitting it at different times and at different intensities, and then it has a recovery period to grow back. Wayne Berry told me one time that we need to look at every plant as dying. And in a typical grazing situation, one plant is being overgrazed and one plant's dying from being undergrazed. And so if we can manage that between the two of them so we have an even graze to get every plant growing and healthy, that becomes our goal. Like that winter fat, cattle love it. So if you're in a season-long grazing deal, they'll totally graze it out, because as soon as it pops up, they'll bite it down. Well, if it don't have that recovery period after that, pretty soon it's going to be gone because it's shrunk its roots up to nothing, and then it's a dead plant.
Our weed population is really, Canadian thistle and that stuff has real diminished a lot. So to me, that's saying our soil health is getting better.
I said one time, somebody called and asked how much rain I got, and I said all of it. So this last fall, we got a 3-inch rain over a couple days. And we went to town, and I'd seen where a lot of dams and draws had ran water and dams had filled up, and none of ours did, which made me happy because I know that it went in the ground. So that moisture, that cycle, that water cycle is really working. Well, then it was about a day after that I noticed some of my water holes started filling up. And they were doing it from the bottom. It was like 88,000 gallons of water per acre that went right straight down into the ground. So that helps gives us confidence for the next year that ground has moisture in it.
The number 2 thing is make sure you're calving right with nature. You got to be careful with your cows, because if they slip too much, and it is harder to keep condition on him grazing standing grass, standing forage. Plus we have the calf drawn on them, so the calf's drawn them till the 1st of March. And if you're not calving in sync with nature, and your cow's in 4.5 frame score, when you start calving, you will be out of the cow business within a year. So what we did is moved our calving date back so they're calving on green grass. They're on at least 60 days of green grass before they calve. When our cows gain that weight back, and calving on good, healthy, dry ground with tall grass. I mean, green grass, that's the healthiest you can get that calf. We've changed the style of our cattle. They're more efficient than they used to be. Our cows will calve any place on the ranch, wherever they're at in their rotation. And that allowed us to change our whole operation.
Seasonal weather impacts year-round grazing immensely. I mean, you gotta always keep an eye on the weather.
If you get too deep of snow and then ice crust on it, the cows cannot get through it. Then we start substituting our feed.
But you're always running them cost analysis on whether it's hay or maybe a supplement to keep grazing. Might be a cheaper alternative depending on what your protein is or what your need is. And there's some years where we have enough cover that we just absolutely need no supplement. That's one of them things to keep an eye on too. Or if you have the mass and the energy and the protein level out there that you don't need to be supplementing, then there's going to be other years where you're going to need to be supplementing.
I have fed my way through drought. I've used hay to stretch my pasture sometime in the wintertime, but usually 2 weeks at a time.
There's different times where supplement or substitute are two different things. So you got to keep an eye on that, and if you're going to be substituting too much, you're better off to be off that ground than to be on it. But then there's other times where maybe there's a chunk of ground that needs energy input, organic matter. You got to learn to roll with the punches. Nothing's ever set in stone. Like I mentioned earlier, if a storm blows in, we got to move cattle into protection or something. And sometimes that changes your numbers. You need to, like say, destock or have less of them. Sometimes you can have more of them. And that's something we do by monitoring. We monitor in the fall and then early spring again. Learning to be flexible is a really big deal on year-round grazing.
What does it cost to wean that calf? 80% of our cost to wean a calf is our winter feed cost.
There was a time where you could buy hay for $50 a ton and have it put in here, and we thought it was expensive, and now it's $250 a ton.
Oh, we went from haying about 1,500 acres down to about 400 acres. Same number of cows, but just winter grazing. That's a pretty good savings.
And now, the tractor gets used once a month, roughly. We got a pickup with a bale bed on it. That pickup costs 20% of what the tractor costs. You know, a lot of times I can run out there with a four-wheeler and end up using 2 gallons of gas a week, you know, versus 2 gallons an hour. That's kind of crazy on that.
And I figured this up 5 years ago, where the average of a 5-state area was $864 to wean a calf, and we were doing it for $450.
So if we can do that year-round grazing and have more cattle and have that more weight per acre to sell off, is financially is a bonus.
Equipment cost goes down, input cost goes down, fuel cost goes down. But the biggest thing is a lifestyle. I mean, we no longer have to worry about feeding cows every day, and it's nice to be able to rotate in the wintertime.
A lot of people, you know, they'll get into spring and summer and they'll move cows a lot and really utilize that time. Ours is year-round that way, but wintertime it's really easy because you're not doing as many chores, and I can go tear down and build a fence and rebuild it back in 20 minutes or so. That's my chore requirement for the day for them cows. So, and I walk it all. The guy needs some exercise, and that's good for your mental health as well.
That's one of the big ones, is the stress management on the place. When I make a new plan, I design it for a 10-year-old kid to run. That's my whole design. That is about as simple as you can make a ranch run, and that takes most of the stress out of your life. Doesn't take it all out, but it takes a lot of your stress out of your life. For an example, when we used to have to get our cows in to work them or do whatever we need to, we'd have to call the neighbors. It'd be 8 to 10 of us here, and it'd take us 2 to 3 hours to make sure we got them corralled. Now, I basically do it by myself, or Mary Lou and I can do it, just the two of us. We can put them wherever we want to. And that's taking the stress out of our lives. And part of that's low stress cattle handling, but that's all part of the program.
You know, if you don't think it can work, just try to start extending your grazing season. You know, if you're grazing 6 months now, you know, try to get it out to 8 months. If you're grazing 8 months, try to get it out to 10 months. You don't have to just jump into it whole hog. Just start setting that up so that you have rest and recovery in all them pastures. But just start grazing a little bit longer.
Probably one of the biggest things I would recommend if people want to get into year-round grazing is sit down with somebody that does it. Have them help you walk through it. Year-round grazing lowered our input cost immensely, and that allowed us to change our whole operation. We started making money. We started making our land healthier, had more fun with our cattle. Our kids would kind of argue to see who got to go with me to move cows. Can't get much better than that.